have you always had these perspectives on government and what causes great communities? Were you brought up that way? What happened to where you started saying, you know what, I need to stand up and do things like reduce taxes or stand up for medical freedom, like you were just talking about with the vaccines and those kind of things? Where did all this start for you?
Well, I think naturally I'm a contrarian. I think I have a healthy distrust of government. I have a it's really from my family. And my father in particular is a constitutionalist, and we would have conversations about government. And I think, unfortunately, that happens too infrequently, right?
Right.
With Americans and with Utahns. I think the level of civic and economic literacy amongst our residents is it could be improved. Let's just say it. Let's
No,
just say it
it's
that way.
horrible. There's actually a lot of social media. I don't know, Brandon, if you've seen them, where they go around and interview people and just ask them like basic questions, and they can't even answer any.
What's the saying? If you don't get involved with politics, politics will get you involved. It's something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You're not interested in politics. Politics is definitely interested in you. It will commandeer your life, uh, and that's what people. You take a look at the founding of this country, and people were very conversant in the Constitution. I mean, it takes maybe 30, 40 minutes to read the whole thing with all the amendments. And if you take out the amendments, you just want to look at the core, 7 articles of the Constitution, in 20, 30 minutes time, you can read through it. And people used to debate, the different pieces of the Constitution. Uh, they were very engaged, not just voting. I mean, engagement, I think, extends far beyond just placing a vote. You have to be informed. Um, you've got to be conversant in the issues and know whether or not your liberties are being trampled. Um, that's we are the safeguards. The power is in the people. We're the ones that are supposed to be safeguarding the rights that our founders bled and died for.
That's
And yeah, unfortunately, that doesn't. We don't have enough of that dialogue going on today. So that's really where it stemmed from. My family, we would openly talk about these things, say at the kitchen table. My undergraduate degree is in political science and economics, and went on to pursue business. But I've always had part of me that was interested in government. And back in 2013, I decided to run for city council. That was the first time I even had an inkling to run for office. We had an issue in our neighborhood that had me attend city council meetings, and I just looked at the dais, and no disrespect to people that were there, I just felt like, I've got a business background. I'm somebody that could add value to our city. This is my community. This is where I want to always call home. This is where I want to raise my family and kids. So I wanted to step up, and I did. I ran against a 12-year incumbent. I knocked every door. I ran on a certain platform of smaller government and economic development so that we could lower our taxes and fees and having more community engagement. And it resonated. I won by 105 votes. And then I ran 4 years later for mayor against another 12-year incumbent and ended up, winning a good 60% of the vote here at that time, and then was reelected in 21 and ran unopposed. So I don't know if that's a sign of I'm just doing things right. I mean, it must be, or other people just they're just content with the way things are going.
Well, it's good. Yeah, I mean, I think what you just said brings me. I was actually just at lunch with a guy. We were talking about the mayor here in St. George, and his father was one of my teachers in junior high and high school, actually, and it was just a great guy. And he retired about 5 years ago. And I go, wow, I never saw your dad retiring. Why did he do that? And he goes, well, the education system has changed so much. He just couldn't be himself. And this was a teacher that everybody in our community loves. He is a great man, and but felt like he couldn't be the man he was to impact children's lives the way he had always been because of education has changed. So going back to the question or the comment you made about people not understanding, just being able to go through the Constitution, right? A lot of that stuff is not being taught in schools. What's your perspective on what's happening in schools today? And how do we fix these things? Because I personally believe that a lot of the challenges we're seeing in our communities are because of the education system, when he says his father retired in 2017, we don't realize like a lot of those kids are where a huge percentage of these votes are coming from, where it wasn't a normal thing in the past that young kids would vote like that, but they are now. I think because of social media and things, there's a lot more youth voting than normal, or at least having a bigger voice than in the past. So I think education and what we're teaching kids in junior high and high school has a big impact on our communities. How do we fix some of these problems, or do you see a problem in it? What are some of the problems, and then how would you fix them?
Yeah, great question. Yes, there are a couple of huge problems with respect to education. I go through a few of them. And first of which, on the federal level, and this office that I'm seeking in U.S. Senate, has to deal with that. There shouldn't be a Department of Education. I mean, frankly, there's no constitutional directive prerogative for federal government being involved in education. The education budget is about $174 billion they have to spend this year. Like, why do we have that?
Wow.
And the state of Utah,
Crazy.
Only about 7% of their budget. I spoke to a couple of the state school board reps, and that's about the amount of the state budget that comes from federal funds. It would be so nice just to be rid of that. Just cut that string altogether, because it comes with so many strings in terms of education and what they're trying to teach people. That's the first thing. Secondly, with the state, the other big issue that I see is that partly because of that federal string and that attachment, but also just some other things that are going on with education, you've got this wokism that is being taught at schools. And I'm 100% against it. If you go to my website at trentstaggs.com, you take a look at the issues page, I've got smaller government, safer family, stronger economy. And under the safer families theme, there are 3 issues under each one of those overarching themes. And under the safer families, education is part of it. Get rid of the Department of Education at the federal level. But then I also have a section called woke and state. And I say there needs to be a wall of separation between woke and state. I'm tired of hearing about this separation between church and state. Well, wokeism is its own ideology and its own religion. I believe that's the case. It's got its own dogma. It may not have a pope or a Bible per se, but it's an ideology. That secularist ideology is being taught at schools, and it's pervasive. And it's been happening and going on for decades now, 50, 60 plus years. And that's had an impact. That's had an impact on what we were just talking about before, about civics not really being taught. I mean, economic and civic literacy is at an all-time low. Patriotism is at an all-time low. This wokeism is actually teaching kids to hate their own country. And it can't be in school. It can't. I mean, one thing that I fought against as well, back in April, I actually addressed our school board. The Jordan School District encompasses Riverton City, and they actually have their board meetings in Riverton. They've got a facility here where they have their board meetings. I conduct a school safety roundtable at the outset of every school year. And we talk about the city, how the city can help the schools and our kids. The cities here in Utah don't fund education and they don't set the curriculum. But I said, nonetheless, these are our kids and we're very interested in them. The cities do provide school resource officers, crossing guards. Those are actually city employees. A lot of people don't know that. So we pay for that. We determine these safe walking routes. So over the years, I've had requests to bring in more school resource officers, done. More crossing guards, done. And then other programs to help drive awareness of mental health issues. We did that as a community to try to destigmatize that and talk about it. But this last year, I brought up these inappropriate materials in schools. And I said, what is being done here? This is as much a safety issue as physical and mental safety. I didn't get a response. I kept after it, never got anything back from school administrators. So finally in April, nearing the end of the school year, I said, enough is enough. I went there, attended the school board meeting. I've been talking with parent groups and residents here that were sending me examples of things that their kids were having to learn in school. And it was obscene. It was literally obscene. And we have a state representative, Ken Ivory, that just passed a law last year that talks about inappropriate materials. And it says, look, if there are these 5 things, if there are depictions or illustrations of these things this is inappropriate. It's pornographic. It shouldn't be taught. I mean, if we can't talk about it on the 6 o'clock news, why on earth is my fifth grader, or seventh grader learning this garbage? It's out of control. So I called out the school board, and that video actually went viral on Twitter, and we got an overwhelming response from people. And we're continuing to work with them to make sure that this is taken out of schools.
So,
That's what we need. We need people that are bold. To answer your question, we need people that are bold and are going to stand up and say enough of this garbage. Solid people that will stand up and make sure that we make the change that we need to.
yeah. So do you think that you obviously get rid of the Department of Education? Who do you believe should control the curriculums? Because I believe, we choose a place to live based on where our kids are going to schools. A lot of people buy homes based on where the schools are. Who do you believe should be controlling what our children are learning in schools?
Parents. I say on my website that parental control of education isn't just priority A, it's priority A to Z for me.
Love it.
Look, we need to, our educators are really there in a secondary role. The role of parents is paramount. And that's what I've tried to point out, even with school districts like the Jordan School District. The education community likes to call out the per pupil spending, and there isn't a high correlation in Utah really amongst per pupil spending and outcomes and test scores. It really comes down to whether there's it's culture. It's whether they've got a great family network. That's going to help kids succeed more than anything. If their parents are involved, and you've got great organizations like Utah Parents United and others that are really getting out there and making it easy for parents to, number one, be aware of materials that may be inappropriate, that are being taught in schools, and how parents, maybe more importantly, how they can engage and how they can act and maybe change that.